ahead and get started. It will be a little difficult to do the practice scenarios without more people and get the effect of it. So if we get down to the practice part and we still are a small group, we'll have to sort of figure it out then and maybe have a little bit more discussion time. My name is Courtney Mangus. Welcome to today's Bystander Intervention training. I am the programs coordinator at the Council on American Islamic Relations. I'm going to be leading this Bystander Intervention training today. Before we get started, feel free to take breaks as needed. I'm not sure where the bathrooms are, but you probably know where the bathrooms are. So feel free to take those bathroom breaks. Okay, so let's get started. How many of you are familiar with CAIR? What it stands for? So CAIR is the Council on American Islamic Relations. We're the largest Muslim nonprofit civil rights organization in the country. We have offices all over. We have about 36 offices across the nation. Our oldest office is actually in the San Francisco Bay Area. We were founded in 1994, so we were the first office to be founded. The core of our work is providing free legal services to people who are affected by a variety of discrimination, hate crimes, hate incidents, police harassment. We also have started doing immigration services. We also do media relations, youth workshops, youth empowerment programs, and then community workshops like these. So we're really proud of the work that we do at CAIR. First, I'll just give you some. This training was originally created by the Montgomery County Civil Rights Coalition. It was born out of an event that happened in Portland when two women were being harassed on a subway, and two men stepped in to try to stop the attacker. And in the incident, they were killed doing so. So this training was created to sort of allow people to step in, to intervene in a way that's going to keep everyone safe and de-escalate rather than escalate the situation. We've since then adapted this training. We've done it for about 2.5 years. We've trained over 2,000 people. And in our experience, we have revised it and made it a little bit easier to teach widespread. So we're really proud of the work that we do at CAIR, but we realize the reasons that we need to do this kind of training is because there are structural issues that are at work in our society. Things like racism, classism, sexism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, homophobia, these kind of things that perpetuate hate incidents that are happening in the world. And it's upon all of us to do the continued work, to be part of a larger movement to dismantle these systems of oppression. So this training is really a stopgap measure. It's an emergency response, but it isn't a long-term solution. In order to have those kind of long-term solutions, we should all be involved in a larger movement for change and policy change and educational change. But with that said, these hate incidents and hate crimes are continuing to happen, even if we continue to fight against these systems of oppression. So we're using this training to sort of help you step in when you see a hate incident or a hate crime, and sort of allow that to de-escalate. So it's really like an emergency response, but not a long-term solution. So we know that in our organization, we track a lot of data about the Muslim community. We're a Muslim civil rights organization. The core of our work is protecting the rights of American Muslims. And we see that the hate crimes and hate incidences have been on the rise over the last couple of years. So we've had a big uptake in reported incidents. And those are really only the tip of the iceberg because most of these incidents don't get reported. But we also recognize that the situations that are happening in our community really mirror what's happening in all the other marginalized communities. And I also want to note that the Muslim community is very diverse. Most American Muslims are Black. Some are immigrants. Some are in poverty. Some are gay. Some are a variety of different identities, right? So like when we talk about our training is going to help dismantle this sort of hate incidents for all marginalized communities that can be attacked, not just the Muslim community. how many of you have experienced, witnessed, heard about, or seen an incident that is a hate crime or something like that? Yeah, so normally when we do this training in our larger groups, we notice that about at least 50% of the room has seen or heard about one of these incidents. And it's really shocking because even though we live in the Bay Area, which a lot of people kind of see as like a bubble, right? It's not the same as a lot of other parts of America. It's very diverse, so people kind of assume that these things don't happen here. But we see the same kind of statistics here. So would anyone care to share what they have seen, heard about, or witnessed as far as like a hate incident or a hate crime?
I had one from many years ago. We lived in San Luis Obispo when 9/11 occurred, and we had a Muslim friend and her children. They were crossing the street to go to meet us at a music class, and someone who was driving sped up as they were crossing. She wore a hijab and or a scarf. I'm not sure what the proper terminology is. And they they weren't hit, they weren't hurt, but it was very frightening, and it was obvious that
they were
doing done
to scare them. Yeah, and that's really scary, especially in light of like recent events, because I don't know if you heard about the Sunnyvale accident that happened like a month and a half ago. This is right near the Sunnyvale Library, and I did one of these trainings there as well. And the community is still kind of reeling from the fact that in Sunnyvale about a month and a half ago, a person tried to run over a family that he thought was Muslim. So he actually drove his car into a family group. One of the girls, the daughter, was hospitalized as a result. Everyone survived, but it was a very startling thing to happen so close to like what people think as like safe neighborhoods and safe communities. So
Well,
we
we
really
did say the Gilroy shooting was
Yep, the
was a
Gilroy
hate
shooting.
crime,
Yep.
so.
And that, it's starting to make us realize that even though we think our communities are safe, and we think that they're, that we have certain opinions about, diversity and inclusion and that sort of thing, these things are still happening. We're still at risk. Okay. So what we're going to be doing today, our goal today is to be able to have a plan, to know how to react when you see a situation that is a hate crime or a hate incident. To know the steps that you can put into place to de-escalate that. So what we're going to be covering today, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the values that underline this training. And that will help you get kind of grounded in our goals for the training. Then we're going to go through a series of steps that you can use to de-escalate an attacker in different scenarios. And then after that, we'll talk about ways in how to secondarily intervene, such as like collecting evidence or video. Then hopefully during our practice session, we'll get a couple people to act out a scenario, and then we will do an activity called the hassle line, which is used during the civil rights movement in order to teach people how to stay calm in heated situations. Then we will, we'll practice them. I would say break up into groups, but we don't have enough people to do that, so we will practice those scenarios. So does everyone have a handout here? So the values that underline our training, you can follow along on your handout as well. We're going to just talk about these values a bit. So we've solidified our values into 3 words: safety, support, and solidarity. And I think reviewing these values is really important because when you're in a situation, you may not remember all the steps that you want to take or that you were told to take in order to de-escalate. Or there may be like obstacles and challenges in order to utilize those steps. So if you forget or you don't know which steps to use, or it seems kind of confusing in the moment, because there's always going to be, every situation is different. We can't cover every possible scenario. Fall back on these values, because if you can achieve these values, then you can modify those steps to make sense in that moment. So our first value is safety. So could you read the first bullet point under safety?
Sure, de-escalation is the safest way to respond.
Yeah, so it's easy to lash out. There are many unknown factors involved when dealing with strangers that are, attacking each other, or that a stranger who is an attacker. So since there's so many unknown factors, we don't know what someone's capable of. De-escalation is the safest way to respond, not just for you as the bystander who's intervening, but also for the targeted person who is in this situation. Could you read the next bullet point?
Oh, sure. Be aware of how your intervention affects the safety of the various persons involved in the situation.
Yeah, so throughout this training, we're going to be talking about different scenarios, different options for dealing with those scenarios. And you're going to have to constantly be thinking about, how does my choice in this moment affect the scenario? Is it escalating or is it de-escalating? Is it making the targeted person feel safer or less safe? Is it making them feel supported or less supported? So throughout this, and when you're thinking about, oh, should I do this or that, think about what effect is it having? So even in the real world scenarios, every choice you make, you're not exactly sure what the outcome will be after that, how the attacker will respond. So you need to be able to evaluate and adjust your strategy. Could you read the next one?
Okay, practicing how to respond. Help us to get past our hesitation so we can step up when necessary.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing some practice in this training, and it feels kind of weird to do practice, but it's really necessary in order to get that muscle memory to feel comfortable to step in. So our next value is support. Could you read the first one?
We're there to support what the targeted person wants.
Yeah, so this means that we're providing options for the targeted person. We're not making decisions for them. Could you read the next one?
Sure. We ask the targeted person if they want our help. We ask how we can best help them, and we ask before we touch them.
So consent is essential in life and in this training. And before we do anything for a targeted person or with a targeted person, we want to check in with them and make sure that they're comfortable with what we're doing. That has to do with talking to them, asking them to go to a different location, that sort of thing. We always want to be checking in and making sure they're okay with it. Could you read the last one?
We want to shift the attention in the situation to the target person by interacting as much as we can only with the target person and ignoring the attacker.
Yeah, so we do this both because it's most effective and because we believe that the targeted person deserves our attention more. And you'll kind of see how that works out when we do the practice. So our next value is solidarity. Could you read the first one of solidarity?
Nonviolence is the most courageous way to respond.
Yeah, so it's easy to lash out, and it's more difficult to hold in your emotions and act from a principled place. But we hope by doing this training, you're going to feel more comfortable to sort of hold in your emotions, think strategically and practically about your decision making. Please read the second one.
We are there with the targeted person in solidarity, not as a savior.
Yeah, so although our natural inclination is to go to the source of the trouble and try to make it stop, in other words, to go directly to the attacker and tell them that they're wrong and try to get them to stop, we recognize that this is not the most strategic way to respond. It is a lot more strategic, and it works better to de-escalate that situation. It also doesn't empower the targeted person. So if going directly to the attacker doesn't make the targeted person feel supported, it doesn't make them feel comforted, they're still alone going through this on their own. And it may not be exactly what they want to happen. Maybe they don't want the situation to continue escalating. So our last one.
We're not calling the target person victim because we want them to retain agencies in the situation.
Yeah, so you've heard me saying targeted person, and we're using that language because we really want, one of our goals in this training is to give the targeted person back the power that they have lost in the situation. When someone's being attacked or targeted or harassed, they don't really have a lot of power in that situation to decide what happens next. And so what we want to do as people who are stepping in is check in with them and give them that power back. Allow them to make decisions. And that's something that they don't normally have, even when people do step in. And we reflect that in the language that we're using, so we're using targeted person rather than victim. So, so when it comes down to it with the values, always fall back on trying to create safety, support, and solidarity. So creating a safe space for the targeted person, supporting them, which means giving them, you know, a power and authority. And then being with them in solidarity and not as a savior. So next we're going to go through some of the step-by-step directions that you can take in order to de-escalate a situation that is a hate crime or a hate incident. You might have seen this cartoon before. It was kind of popular on Facebook, but it was like maybe 10 years ago by now. So it was by a French cartoonist called Merrill. And it sort of depicts the steps that we were talking about in this training, so it's going to be a good visual example. And I'll go through these this time. So our first step is to assess the situation. Be ready to intervene. This means that you're mentally and physically prepared to step in. So if you recognize that before you step in, you may not be in the right psychological state to be stepping in, maybe you had a bad day, maybe you're not going to be able to be calm in that moment, then you should recognize that maybe you're not the right person to step in, because you need to have a calm head in order to step in and de-escalate. Be aware of what's happening around you. So this means, just scanning your scene. So if you're out in public, just knowing what's happening around you, because you won't be able to step into a hate incident or a hate crime if you don't notice what's happening. So this means having an earbud out, scanning what's happening around you. So once you assess the situation and you see that there is a hate crime or a hate incident, or there's someone being targeted, and you want to step in, the next thing for you to do is to get others involved. So be the bystander effect. Does anyone know what the bystander effect is?
The more people who stand by and don't do anything, the more people stand by and don't do anything.
Yeah, so it's essentially that. It's a psychological phenomenon that means that the more people that witness an event, the less likely any of them are to step in. So if it's a smaller group, like in this group, if I were to fall right now, probably most of you would feel that you would want to help. But if we were in a group of hundreds of people and I fell down, none of those people would feel responsible to help. So the larger the group that you're in, the less responsible any one person feels about it. And that's a psychological phenomenon that all of us naturally feel because we diffuse responsibility for things on those around us. So one way that you can beat the bystander effect and get other people to feel responsible is to just remind them that they are. So if you're sitting on a bus and you see an incident, you can simply say, hey, do you see what's happening? I think we should do something. And that simple phrase with a stranger can help them be reminded that maybe they should have some responsibility in doing something about this scenario. So once you have gotten someone else's attention and you've beat that bystander effect, the next thing to do with the other people around you is to give them directions about how to best intervene. And this is because it's unlikely that any people that you meet have taken training on how to do de-escalation, and they may not know the right way to intervene. And if they want to intervene, what they want to do may be drastically different from what your goals are in that moment. So by simply saying, hey, can you stay here and take a video? I'm going to go talk to that targeted person. So you've already said, you've given them that line of, hey, do you see what's happening? I think we should do something. Could you take a video while I go talk to them? So you've given them a direction as a leader in this situation. You're directing them to do something that's going to help your situation, and you've gotten someone else involved. So our next step after we've gotten someone else involved is to start the actual intervention, to step in and talk to the targeted person, essentially. So you want to introduce yourself calmly and quietly and explain that you saw what was happening and you want to provide support. It's important in this moment to be aware of the way in which you enter. So you don't want to run up to a targeted person and yell at them, like, hey, come with me if you want to live, You want to approach them calmly, quietly, and just say, hey, I see what's happening here. I want to be here to support you. Can I sit down next to you? So a simple phrase like that, and I like to give simple phrases because they're easier to replicate. A simple phrase like that lets them know why you are, like why you're there, that you're not there to be another attacker, and it lets them know what you're asking, so like that you want to just join them. And I'm phrasing that as a question, again, because we want to give the targeted person the option to say no. Yeah, and I would suggest being straightforward in this moment. So sometimes people will say like, hey, don't I know you from the library? And that person will be like, I don't go to the library. I don't know who you are, like get away from me. So you don't want to try to confuse them with a fabricated story because they're already upset, and as a stranger, you're just going to confuse them more and make them more frightful of your presence. So you just want to be straightforward about why you're there and who you are. So once you've done that, make sure that you ask permission before doing anything. And if the person, the targeted person, says no, feel free to step back and monitor the situation. So if I said to the targeted person, hey, my name's Courtney, I see what's happening here and I want to be here to support you. Can I sit down next to you? And they say like, no, I want to be left alone. I'm going to be like, okay, that's fine, I understand. I'm going to be over here on this other seat in case you change your mind. So you're giving them their space, you're respecting their decision to be left alone, but you're letting them know that you're not like going to completely abandon. You're going to be there in case they change their mind. And that's a way that you can still provide support without intervening in a way that they don't like. And in that moment, you can monitor the situation from afar. And if you see the situation continues to escalate, that might be a good time to take a video, check in with the person after the attacker had left and say, hey, how are you? Are you feeling okay? Do you want to talk about it? I have video evidence of this. Would you like me to send it to you so you can seek legal remedy, for example? These are just many examples. So if the targeted person says like, yeah, I'd like you to sit next to me, the next step that you're going to do is ignore the attacker. And that's even if they escalate verbally. We believe that ignoring the attacker has the greatest chance of de-escalation. But it isn't guaranteed. I don't want to make you think that it's completely guaranteed. Sometimes people come into a situation with an intent to do harm, and nothing you do can dissuade them. And that's a very real possibility. And as a bystander who's stepping in, you are still choosing to put yourself in somewhat of a risky situation. There's no way out of that. We just believe that stepping in to support the targeted person in this way, rather than confront the attacker, is still safer. But be aware of the placement of the exit routes, and be aware of the attacker's location. You don't want to turn your back on an attacker, and you want to be able to see all the exit routes. And even though you're not making eye contact with the attacker, you still want to see them in your peripheral somewhere. Because if they become violent, if they continue to escalate, and you notice that ignoring them is not causing a de-escalation, this is when you should turn to the targeted person and say, hey, I don't think that this person is going to calm down. Would you be comfortable with moving to a different seat? Or would you be comfortable with getting off the bus? I'm using the bus as an example because it's in the cartoon. Would you be okay with getting off the bus and getting on another bus? That sort of thing. You're not telling them to do it, but you're giving them the option, and you're monitoring that this situation isn't escalating. This situation is not de-escalating. So you need to start thinking about exit plans. But for most of the situations, ignoring an attacker will cause them to de-escalate. And when this happens, and the attacker gets ignored, feels irrelevant, he doesn't feel like he's getting the attention that he was seeking, he has no one to engage with anymore, and he will eventually leave. Continue to stay around to support the targeted person. A lot of times when this training was done before, people would say they were in at ignoring the attacker. But what happens after the targeted person after you leave? What you don't want to do is just say, hey, are you good? You're good. I gotta go somewhere now. You want to keep, check in with them. Let them know that maybe they should report this incident. CAIR and the ACLU have incident report forms. for these situations, and I've included them on your handout, in case you want to know how to do that. This is a good time to say, hey, would you like to report this incident, so that it's documented and we have data about it, and you might be able to get legal remedies. They might also want some help finding mental health resources, so point them in the direction of those mental health resources. And then make sure they get to their destination safely. This is essential. You don't have to like say bye to them in an area that might not be safe for them. You don't want to have to force them to like walk home or get themselves home without making sure they get home safely. So I recommend helping them get on like public transportation, or giving them a Lyft or an Uber, offering to walk them to their next destination. So to go through this really our first step is to assess the situation, and this means being ready to intervene. This means scanning your scene and then realizing that there is a situation developing. You are going to get others involved. So you're going to go to the people around you and say, hey, do you see what's happening? I think we should do something. Then you're going to give them concrete directions, like, could you take video evidence of this while I go talk to the targeted person? Then you're going to step in and talk to that targeted person. You're going to introduce yourself and say, hey, my name's Courtney. I see what's happening. I want to be here to support you. Can I sit down next to you? You're going to be aware of your body tone, your body language, and the tone of your voice. And then you're going to continue to ignore the attacker while you're making conversation with the targeted person. It doesn't really matter what you're talking about. You don't have to talk about that particular incident. This also serves to give the targeted person something else to focus on other than the words that the attacker is saying. So it allows them to sort of focus in on a more positive conversation. But you're just going to continue to talk to the targeted person, ignoring the attacker. And then once the attacker leaves, you're going to stay around and continue to support the targeted person, make sure they get to the destination safely. So now we're going to talk about how to secondarily intervene. And this is useful when this could be something that the other people you get involved with, when you get others involved, this can be something that they do. So like taking video or audio recordings of the situation. It might also be useful if for whatever reason it's not possible for you to step into the scene. There might be like physical barriers or limitations. And if that's the case, I recommend that you take video evidence of this. This isn't a know your rights training, but I just wanted to quickly cover some of the legal ramifications of recording people in public. So it depends on which state you're in, and I'm going to talk about California. So it's legal in all states to take photos of people in public. So you can just take regular photos of people in public without their permission. It's not, however, legal in all states to take audio recordings of people in public. And in California, the rule is basically that you can't take audio recordings of people in public when they have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And so if someone is having a private conversation on a bus with someone else, you can't really record that conversation without both parties' permission. And that's because a reasonable person would view that as a private conversation. But if I was yelling at someone from across the bus, a reasonable person would not view that as a private conversation, and they have essentially waived their right to privacy. So you would be able to record that. And that's most of the situations that we're talking about. A lot of times the attackers are very loud. Also just be aware of how your recording is going to affect the attacker in the scene. So logically we can think about the fact that recording an attacker may put a situation to a rapid end because they may see that they're being recorded, they don't want something embarrassing to be caught on camera, they don't want this to go public, and they might cease their activities. On the other hand, you may reasonably expect that an attacker, having realized that they're being recorded, will escalate even further, become angry that they're being recorded, and try to grab or take their phone. So when you are recording, make sure to monitor that situation, like I mentioned before in our values, and be able to adjust your strategies accordingly. If you think that when you're taking video, that the attacker is escalating, you should, hide your phone, drop your phone, or go audio only, right? So you can do that by just holding your phone. And if it's too dangerous to stop recording. The other thing that you should think about is, so when it comes to trying to record video that doesn't escalate an attacker, I like to say that you should be taking this video from a bit of a distance. So if you're the bystander and you're taking a video and the attacker's like right here and you're in their face, and even if you're not talking to them and you're not making eye contact with them, you're still communicating with them like in a passive aggressive way. You're basically saying to them, hey, I have you on camera, I caught you, right? And that's a way of communicating with them, and that's going to be more likely to escalate them, and they're going to respond back by taking the phone or getting aggressive. But if you are like, if you're the attacker and I'm all the way over here, and I'm just like this, the attacker is less likely to notice that I'm doing this, and less likely to feel like it's a personal attack. So they're going to be less likely to engage with that person who's holding the camera.
Courtney, do you advise to not proceed unless you get someone who is willing to record? Like
No.
I might say,
No, still proceed.
still, okay.
Yeah, even if you can't record, still definitely step in. I think the priority here is talking to the targeted person. And the video evidence is like icing on the top. It's great to get, but it's not more important than talking to the targeted person. Also, just with basic camera functions, I recommend that you hold your phone like horizontally when you take video, and that's because this captures more of the scene, and it's also the orientation of media and television. What else was I gonna say? Also, if you don't know how to use your phone like super well, you can get to your camera function on an iPhone really quick by just swiping left. And I think on an Android it's like up, but I don't have one, so I don't know. Another thing I would recommend is that you make sure that you have memory on your phone. Because some people, I have a friend who like never has space to take a picture on her phone. She always got to go through and like delete apps and phone and like messages and all that stuff to even take a photo. And that means that you are not ready to take a video in this situation. Because when someone's attacking someone, this is not the time to try to have to delete things off your phone. So just always kind of think about having space on your phone for that. Yeah, that's about it for how to secondarily intervene. One of the questions that we often get asked is, should you call the police? And we say, we generally advise people not to immediately call the police unless the situation has become physically violent. And this is because there are many people who feel that the presence of police is a risk of escalation in and of itself. And this can be because they're undocumented and they fear arrest, or because their community's experience with the police has been dangerous and disrespectful. And we recognize that there's a strong level of privilege in feeling safe to call the police and sort of feeling safe about the response that they'll get from them. And we logically also know that if a situation didn't already involve a firearm, when you call the police, you've entered a firearm into that situation, which is an escalation. And our goal here is to de-escalate that situation and to keep lethal force like at an absolute minimum, if at all. Even physical force, we want to keep that out of the equation, hopefully. So when it comes down to it, we are there to support what the targeted person wants. And that means that if you don't know if the police should be called in that situation, ask the targeted person. When it comes down to it, they should have the authority to say whether or not police are called in. And if they say they don't want the police called in because they don't feel comfortable with that, then don't call the police. One of the other questions that we often get asked is, what if the situation involves police misconduct? And then again, this is an unknown your rights training, but I'm just going to talk quickly about the legality of this. So it's legal in all 50 states to record the actions of the police, audio, photos, video, all of it. As long as you're not physically interfering with those actions. So you have all the rights. The police cannot ask you to stop recording, delete your recording, or hand over your phone. That does not mean, however, that the police won't ask you to stop recording, delete your recording, or hand over your phone. So we recommend the Mobile Justice ACLU app. It's super awesome. And if you have it on your phone, then basically what happens if you witness a situation of police misconduct, specifically police misconduct, you can record it from the Mobile Justice app, and it will live stream that video to the ACLU, which means that if your phone happens to get broken, dropped, stolen, whatever, it doesn't matter because that video is already in the ACLU's hands. This is specifically for the for police misconduct. And the link to get that app is on